Business partnerships are challenging. You need to have a really good why and reason if you're going to take one on. Do you really know them? Date them, go out with them, ask them to go on the Slack a little bit, see the behind the scenes operations of their business. Let me have a little look in the back end of the business. If you build your whole business model off their community and audience, then you're at risk. What if they burn out? What if they shut their business down? What if they kick you out? I'm still keen to, from inception, create something together. Communication frameworks is key. One of the greatest leadership quotes is like, you cannot get upset at over uncommunicated expectations. Hello and welcome back to the Untapped Podcast. Today I'm going to be sharing and jamming on a little bit about how do we create world-class business partnerships and what do we need to think about before we enter into a business partnership with someone. Now, this conversation came from having about 3 phone calls last week with different beautiful women who were considering how they're going to either expand their mission or launch their own thing in the world. And part of these conversations came up and it was like, I'm thinking about getting into a business partnership with this person because they're fully established. One of the students also said, I've been doing lots of business partnerships because deep down I'm actually scared to do my own thing. And so this kind of thought and curiosity came up around business partnerships because this is also something that Delaney and I get asked about a lot because we have run Untapped together for almost 5 years. And yeah, we've learned a lot of lessons, we've made a lot of mistakes, and there's a lot of things for you to consider about how do you create a great business partnership if that is something you're considering doing. So this episode is going to be packed with things to think about before, during, and after your business partnership, and really getting you to a place of intentionality. And maybe it's if you're already in a business partnership, it's going to highlight perhaps some of the things that you have skipped over and what you could go back to put in place to ensure it's a really successful relationship. First thing, business partnerships are challenging. They are really challenging. You need to have a really good why and reason if you're going to take one on, because especially when you're starting out, it's a lot to navigate and figure out how to have 2 visions, 2 values, 2 financial revenue models, everything in the one experience. And at the very same time, business partnerships are incredible. You can make a greater impact. I have had a company where there were 6 female co-founders. It was phenomenal what we achieved, and we had a lot of things in place that made that successful. So I'm going to share from personal experience, conversations I have had with mentors and coaches about how they made great business partnerships, because business partnerships can blow up your potential in your business if done right. They can also be really limiting and really painful and a big waste of time if done wrong. I'm going to cover off the context and intentions you need to think about before you enter. That's the more like high level concept. How to create aligned vision and values, definitions of roles and skill sets and profiling assessments and things that you can do to make sure like this is actually a really good fit. Then how to think about the monetary aspect, revenue share, profit share, equity. How are you going to actually reflect people's efforts? I'm going to do a little bit of risk management because I'm an ex-corporate lawyer. So I like to think about the risks involved in things. And then also talk about, okay, well, if you go forward with this, having gone through this like checklist pretty much, how do you communicate and ensure that it's a successful relationship as well? So let's dive in. The first thing I want you to think about is, why are you entering this business partnership and the context from which you are entering it? Now, if you are sitting there going, well, this other person has a big audience, so many followers, an amazing community, and she's further along than I am, what you're actually doing inside of that narrative is pedestalling someone. So you're basically putting them on a pedestal, saying they have more than I do. And from that context, that's not a powerful context to create from. In fact, it's disempowered. So if you have something like that, really looking at the why behind you're doing it. Yes, there's all the positive narrative of like, oh, it'll be amazing and it'll be, be able to create more together. But I want you to get radically honest with yourself about what's underneath it, right? It might be, well, if I do it with this other person, then it's not as scary if we don't succeed or we fail or, we have to fill this group program or whatever. It's not as scary if there's 2 of us. Again, not a powerful context that you're coming from, because deep down, most likely you're actually like, you know what, I kind of want my own thing. I kind of want to create something of my own. and you're using this person as a little bit of a scapegoat for dealing with your fear of failure. So instead of creating some big complex business partnership that isn't the truth of what you want to do, and you'll just end up making lots of those and then eventually still wanting to do your own thing, the best thing you can do is be radically honest and just say, I do want to do my own thing and it's terrifying and I'm going to get the support and help that I need. Really looking at the context of why you are choosing to go into a business partnership, because what makes an empowered context is when it's two really empowered, really highly skilled individuals saying, you know what, better together is better. We're going to create something exponential. And I know this is true for Delaney and I. I am the heart, I am the people, I am designing curriculum, building community, student success management. Delaney is innovation, strategy, finding the best intellectual property and wisdom out there in tech, and emerging kind of trends and bringing it into our curriculum. Now, before I was in business partnership with him, our programs were incredible, lots of amazing heart, lots of community, amazing team. But then there was some elements of like the real strategy and the real intellectual component that we were missing. So then he can bring that. Now we have a fully expanded vision of what we can create for people. Really looking at that context, because what can occur if you enter into a business partnership from a disempowered context? Firstly, the foundations, and then secondly, what happens is you often create this thing called a drama triangle, which is, okay, well, I'm feeling like the victim, like I'm afraid, I'm scared, or I don't have all the things that this person has, which puts you into what's called the victim role. And the only other place that you can literally perceive other people when you're in victim consciousness is the hero or the villain. The villain would be like, they're awful, I don't think that's the situation here. Or the hero, right? They're going to save the day. They're going to make it all better for me. It's going to be easier. It's the same thing when you're hiring. If you're hiring someone from that context, you always end up frustrated and don't make great decisions, because eventually what can happen is you actually resent the other person without them even knowing. Eventually you're like, oh, I'm kind of annoyed that I'm doing all this work and it's going towards their business, or I have to split the profits, because really, if you were in your most empowered self, you would have done it on your own, let's say. And just know this is different than having your own vision and building a team around that aligned vision. We're talking about business partnerships where it's like we are fully co-creating, we are co-sharing, we are co-building, we're generating everything together. That's very, very different than I have a vision that I want to create and I'm going to hire a team to support me in parts of that. That's a very different thing. Business partnership is like truly trying to get both those visions. Now, so that's the first thing. You really want to look at where you are doing this from and get totally radically honest about that. The next thing is to spend some decent time dating them. Do you really know them? Date them. Go out with them. Ask them to go on the Slack a little bit. See the behind the scenes operations of their business. Like the amount of time that people come to me and said, oh, I want to do this with you and private coaching, whatever, revenue share, all these things. I'm like, okay, like let me have a little look in the back end of the business. And I'm like, oh, wow, I don't know if I want to get into business with that, let's say. So date them, go out on a few dates, get lots of information. Visionaries are very good at looking like everything's amazing and they've got it all figured out. That's part of their allure and design. And you really want to get to have integrity and to make sure that what you need to be in place is in place. Really understanding their business, their experience, and then spending a lot of time, like on the dating thing. If you were dating someone, you'd go out and you'd ask questions. Do you want to get married? Do you want to have kids? Whatever. All these types of questions, like what motivates you? How do you like to spend your weekend? How's your relationship with your mom and your family? It's the same in the business element. What you need to really elicit and understand is their vision and their values and their motivations, right? Vision. Oh my gosh, the amount of times we all say, oh, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking a community for women for healing. Oh, me too. Okay, amazing. And then when you really get into it, there's totally different value systems of how they want to do business. Maybe it's like one person wants to be intimate one-to-one and one person wants scalability and freedom and time. There's totally different motivators to why they're in business. Maybe you thought they were there to help people, but then you realize they're just there to make this really successful and achieve something. And there's like a misalignment there. It's not to say you can't have different things, but you want to spend a lot of time interviewing each other to truly understand, where do you want to be in 5 years with this? Why are you actually doing this? Not like all the nice stuff that people say, but why? What is your true motivator of why you are doing this? And then really starting to understand that at a full depth and breadth, and documenting all of that, the vision and the values, to really see, is there truly an alignment here? Because the hardest thing you're going to hit with two visionary kind of people meeting is that you actually have quite different vision and values, and the integration and the trying to integrate them both can be really challenging. It's why when we're working with students, we don't often recommend that they start a business partnership straight away, because they haven't actually got the fully anchored sense of self and identity and vision yet, usually. And then we're prone to being like, oh, okay, I'll just roll with that for a little bit, when it's so much more effective to be like, I'm super grounded in who I am and what I bring and what I'm doing. And now I can collaborate to some degree. Spending time, if you don't have that yet within yourself, spend time on that before you do a partnership. If you're getting into a business partnership, interview them, date them, ask them lots of those hard questions, and keep clarifying. If you feel like something's unclear or your intuition's like, oh no, that's a bit weird, ask again. Could you just tell me again why you're doing this? What is your vision for this? Where do you see 10 years? Really get to those hard things, because you're going to hit them later otherwise. Okay, let's say you've got good intentions. You've got a clear, aligned vision. You're really in it for the same reasons, or like there's a cohesion there. You see a similar thing in the visions. Then you want to look at like what we would call role definitions, and really thinking about who is playing what role and for what purpose. The worst thing you can ever do is just split everything down in the middle, because that's not going to play to people's strengths. Dee and I tried this, and it just created a lot of arguments and conflict. And so really understanding and taking time to understand each other's unique gifts and unique strengths, and then documenting those in role definitions and descriptions. Like, for the company, I'm the growth strategist and I do this, this, and this because my skills are X, Y, and Z. Or if someone wants to do more marketing or customer delivery, it's like, I'm in customer delivery because my strengths are X, Y, Z, and I love to do this, and this is what I'm responsible for. That's a really, really powerful piece and process to do. If you're not like fully self-aware of all those gifts and parts that you bring, you don't have like language to it, what can be really helpful is to do a free Enneagram assessment online, or pay for the Gallup's, the Clifton Strengths assessment. I'll put the links in the show notes. These will help you have language to understand why you're doing what you're doing. The Enneagram will give you your motivation. That might actually be more effective in the vision and values conversation. But then your Gallup Strengths is going to really give you a language and a terminology of like, okay, this is how I roll. These are the things I'm amazing. For Delaney and I, when we did our Clifton Strengths profiling, it's super clear that I sit more in execution, discipline, focus, achiever, futuristic, and Delaney sits more in thinking and ideation, strategy, intellect, analytical. When we did our Clifton Strengths, we were driving each other crazy for like the first year. And then we did these and saw, okay, we have two really different skill sets, and we can tangibly say those. And then it's really obvious what comes out the back of those. Okay, well, Briony will sit in project management, customer delivery things. Delaney will sit in ideation, strategy, big problem solving and decision making, technology. You get to really then own these different parts and what each person is actually going to do. That's really, really important. There's another assessment called the Colby. It's kind of like your cognitive like processing system. That's really helpful as well. And then the other thing that's huge is love languages. That kind of comes into a later point, but that's how you're going to keep nourishing and feeling rewarded and feeling fulfilled and feeling like your contribution matters. How can you keep being that and doing that for each other? The outcome of this step, you want to have a clear role definition, your skill set, and what you're going to be responsible for in the company. And same for the other person. Now you can use ChatGPT to actually help you write that role definition. You can even put in all your profiling results and say, what's the perfect role that this person should be doing for a coaching company or whatever it is, and it'll help you do that. Now by this point, we've got empowered context, we've got an aligned vision and values that we've really stress tested, and we've got clear roles and like role definitions based on our unique gifts and strengths. Let me emphasize that. Based on your unique gifts and strengths, not just what that person needs. And this is where it's really different when you think about business partnerships. You want to think like, if someone's bringing you in, and this is really common, when you're early on in your business journey or entrepreneurship, is like other people will try and bring you in on their vision, because visionaries do it all the time. What you want to really define is if you're that type of person who's prone to helping a lot of other people, you want to really ask, like, is this something that is truly aligned for me? Am I actually bringing my unique skill set, or are they just basically hiring a team member because That's not a business partnership. And that won't feel good for you if you come in and then you suddenly realize you're basically just pushing paper and doing a whole bunch of admin for this person. And you thought it was a partnership, but actually you're like, I think I'm still sitting in the kind of like, you know, team role. Really defining that and then looking at those strengths and then standing in your self-worth about what those strengths could bring to the company and to the impact, and then creating from that context is huge. If you feel like you don't know those yet, do all of the assessments and make sure you've got lots of language about what you bring and how you work so you can back yourself when we go into the next point, which is the monetary element. Okay, cool. Well, now I can see we've got this amazing vision, we've got unique skills we can bring. How are we going to split this? Now, this will also depend on who's taking the risk. Are there like unique assets that someone already has, whether it's audience or email lists or whatever? But there's a few ways you can think about doing this. The first, like most, hopping into bed with each other kind of example is equity ownership. That might be saying, okay, yes, Thomas, I would love you to come into our business and we're going to give you 5% ownership of the company. That's equity. If you're starting something straight from scratch, then maybe it is just a 50-50. Or if someone's doing more work or their role is more onerous or more responsibilities, maybe they get 75%, you get 25%, whatever it is. But equity ownership is actually choosing the shares that each person owns of the company. That's ownership. Other ways to do it is revenue sharing or profit sharing. Revenue sharing would be like, we work together. I come in, I help you scale this program that you're running from 200,000 to 1 million, and we revenue share it. I get 30% of the revenue, you get 70 or whatever it is. Again, this might be an example if, you're running one specific part of the business together and you do a revenue share model. Revenue share is really great. If you are someone who has your own business and you're considering bringing someone in, perhaps instead of equity, maybe you could do equity ownership later or vesting some equity over time. But revenue share is really great, fair, just kind of like, cool, we work on this together, we grow it, and you get a percentage. Again, the percentages are all down to how much effort and work and skill set and things like that. There are some industry standards. You can use ChatGPT to search those as well. And then you have something called profit sharing. Revenue sharing is like, we bring in 400,000 on this program together. We share it, we split it. Profit sharing is, we bring in this revenue, we pay for all the costs and expenses of the deliverables of that revenue. For example, you run a group program together, but there is kind of like Kajabi subscription fees, an admin person you pay. Then you take out all of those expenses and you get left with the profit, and then you profit share. This is really great to just acknowledge that there is a lot of costs involved of delivering something. A lot of high ticket kind of coaching, consulting programs and things do have high profit margins, but often it's like, we made all this money, and then you forget that there's taxes and subscriptions and all sorts of things to still run an online business. Profit sharing is another kind of option of once everything's paid off, you get a piece of the pie of what's left. Those are some monetary options for you to consider. Again, you can actually put in your strengths and put in your situation into ChatGPT and see if it has any ideas of some cool kind of monetary remuneration, financial remunerations for your unique business partnership. It's really, really helpful. I've used it in a few instances working with clients and one-to-ones and doing some rev share models or whatever it is. And yes, it's really helpful. But again, we need to have stacked this whole list of what I've just gone through, is like have that really clear context and the value of what each person's bringing, and then, ask it from there. Those are kind of the main things. By now you should be feeling really empowered and have a really good to-do list of stuff that you're going to go do before you start your business partnership. The hardest one being to really tune in with yourself and ask, why are you doing this? Do all the assessments, write the roles, choose the revenue share or the financial remuneration model. And then, of course, being an ex-lawyer, you just need to manage your risk. What I mean by that is, there was a conversation the other day about someone coming in. She's starting her business journey and she's getting into business with someone else who has got their business already set up. And I said, look, just think about the risks. If you build your whole business model off their community and audience, then you're at risk. What if they burn out? What if they shut their business down? What if they kick you out? Think about your risks involved in doing this. So what I've been advising and reminding people is to continue to create your own brand. Like, we are in a creator economy. We're going to see more the rise of personal brands and share knowledge sharing, thought leadership. Having a personal brand, doesn't matter what career you're in, is important. Keep your own personal brand separate as well. And then, of course, an email list is a really unique asset to think about. If you're doing a collaboration or a partnership with someone, actually create a email list. Make sure that you're getting all the emails, and you're again thinking about, am I getting exposure to these assets? Or let's say something happens, am I fully at risk and will have nothing left? This is really important to think about, is some of these risk managements. And of course, document everything via contracts. Do not rely on, she's my friend and we've had some nice brunches. Like, document this on paper. It's wild when things go wrong, how much people forget what was agreed and created together, because that faith changes and that relationship changes and then their memory changes. Document everything, write it all down in a Google Doc. You don't necessarily have to pay lawyers and things. You could, but actually just make sure it's all written down. Everyone signs off on it. And if you change things over time, document that too. Again, ChatGPT can be your best friend if you just want to be a bush lawyer and do it yourself as well. Really, just take a moment to think about, what are the risks here for me? Oh, okay, I build their brand, but not my own. Well, let's make sure I keep my own stuff. We grow their email list, but I don't have any exposure to all of that community. Okay, cool. Let's just make sure I'm allowed access to those. Something goes wrong, how do we deal with that? Yeah, just thinking of your exit plan. Of course, it's not like the perfect way to go into a working relationship, but it's something a lot of people kind of oversee, because in the hope of wanting to be positive or be that visionary or futuristic, you've got to be real as well. Like, how are we actually going to navigate this if it gets hard? And that this doesn't mean if things go wrong. This also just protects both people for options. Everyone wants to have options. Everyone wants to know that if they choose to close their business or whatever, they can. We don't want to create a pressure cooker of like, you have to stay, it has to work. This is just kind of future-proofing and thinking, if things change, this is how we'll deal with it. Right. And then my final thing, let's say you're now listening to this, you're like, I'm going to go ahead with my business partnership. Or you've realized, this is a lot of work. I'm making this more complicated. I can just go after my own thing, my own vision to start with, and then use business partnerships to expand, which would definitely be my recommendation. Then if you're still keen to, from inception, create something together, communication frameworks is key. Setting super clear expectations. It's amazing how many of us don't say what we want to say, ask for what we need, and be super clear about what you're bringing to the table. We talked about that. What you expect in return, we talked about that. What you expect from the other party if you do have kind of unsaid expectations. One of the greatest leadership quotes is like, you cannot get upset at over uncommunicated expectations. You're not allowed to get upset later if you didn't say it how it is. Really take a moment to think about, like, what do I expect in this relationship and working relationship? And off the back of that, really think about all the boundaries you want, when you work, your working hours, how you work, how you communicate, how you give each other feedback. I could do a whole episode on this, but really taking the time to think about what are the boundaries that you want to set that's going to make this a great working relationship. We do with our leadership team, every team member, we get everyone to do what's called a user manual, which is just like how to work with me kind of thing. This is what I love. This is when I like to work. This is when I want to do meetings. This is when I'll be online. This is when this is what I expect on Slack. Like, just really laying it out, who you are and how you operate. So much easier for others to communicate with you in that way. And then, of course, consistent check-ins from there, making sure, like, okay, how are we going to keep this vision, this possibility, and this mission alive, whether it's weekly meetings or like a certain WhatsApp group or Slack group. Like, do you have the communication context? A lot of us are working digitally or remotely now. So how are you going to like bring this whole relationship to life through meetings or communication? These are some of my top tips. These are mistakes and lessons. I know for us, like, we've literally made mistakes on every one of these in business partnerships, like got into business partnerships for the wrong reason, thought we had an aligned vision, but realized later, just no, this is really hard and we're not on the same wavelength. Oh my gosh, I told you about D and I just trying to split everything down the middle. We're very different humans with very different skills. So really defining those roles, being super clear about equity and ownership and rev share and what's fair. And then just managing that risk and keeping the communication open. I hope this has been a super practical, helpful insight of how to create these amazing business partnerships moving forwards, and really, give yourself permission to also go after your own dream. If you're doing this from the wrong place or a disempowered place, just know that you also have everything you need to create your own magic. And if you're listening to this, like, I'm still going for it, get into it. And please listen to this episode again and really take all those actions. And I wish you all the best on your endeavors and your creation. There is so much magic through collaboration. I do want to share that. I also just know it can create a lot of challenges. So I wanted to share this in the hope to empower you, not to doubt you, but to empower you with a practical guide to making this really successful if it is something that you want to do. So get out there, make magic, and we'll see you on the next episode.